Yeah, thanks for coming along today. We're going to be talking a little bit about site reliability and evangelism. It's really an experience report from us about our journey over the last year. For any of you who are in the room that are from one of the big tech companies, I'm not sure how much you're going to learn from us, except for the pain that we feel down the other end of the market. So we'll get started. So a little bit about TradeMe. So we're Kiwis. We have flown over from New Zealand, and TradeMe is probably the best way of describing what TradeMe offers is equivalent to what eBay is in most of the geographies. We don't have eBay in New Zealand. There's no real access to it, and I think Gumtree is an equivalent for people in Australia. So we're New Zealand's largest online auction and classifieds website. Just in terms of scale, New Zealand's a population of around about 5.2 million people. We have around about 8 million active accounts on TradeMe, so that tells you how many people in New Zealand have accounts, and the discrepancy there is international people selling into New Zealand. My name is Piers. I'm a SRE practice lead. I am the only SRE at TradeMe, and this is Catherine.
Kia ora, I'm Catherine and I'm a technical product owner. I've been at TradeMe 4 years. So just a little context a bit further into our company. So we have about 300 engineering staff. That's everyone from delivery, our engineers, our SRE team. We underwent a cloud migration 18 months ago, which was a very big project because our website was started in 1999, so there was some fun stuff there. And we have 3 main business units. So that is Marketplace, where you can buy and sell new and used goods. Our Classifieds business unit, which is jobs, motors, which is everything from cars to boats to bikes, and then property, which is renting and selling. So those are our stream-aligned product business units, and then Piers and I sit in common applications to technology, which we refer to as CAT, hence why there's a lot of CAT t-shirts on our floor, and that's mostly platform teams.
Cool. So when I was hired, as I said, that's just over a year ago, my boss sat down and said, right, so site reliability, what do we need to do? And I, as the only SRE in the organization, had assumed that I was going to be taking the Google kind of standard approach of consulting SRE, where you go out and you talk to people across the business about what it is that they do. But Tracy also had a surprise for me, which is here's our telemetry platform. You can look after that as well. So there's a little bit of a crossover between kind of the consulting space and the tools type of SREs that Google has written about at length. So when she said, where do you want to get started, I immediately thought of the pyramid here. It'll be familiar to most of you who've read the book, but in case people haven't, the premise here is that when you're building up your site reliability concepts, unless you have good monitoring, you probably can't do really good, capacity planning. Each level of this pyramid is dependent on the one underneath. And so this model was really the one that I thought, if I'm going to go around the business talking to people about what is working and what's not working, where the gaps are, I'm going to start along these lines here. And so because I had been handed the tools and the telemetry components, I went out across the business and met people who were kind of power users. And one of those people was Catherine, and she became a bit of a champion in the monitoring space. And I'll let her talk about what it was like when I joined.
Yeah, so I started 4 years ago as a tester, so I've actually only been in product 2 months, so please don't ask me how to product, because I'm still really new. So when I started, I was surprised to find that all of our testers did the deploying to production, so it was a pretty automated process, but they were the ones responsible for getting that code into prod and then monitoring it. And this became a problem mostly because some companies might have a release team, and we had just moved that to our testers. And what we really wanted was for the whole squad to own what they're putting into production. So we made the change that the main contributor of the code was the one that would do the action of the deploy, and then the whole squad, or the dev and the tester or whoever, would monitor it together, whether that was for the 10 minutes while deploying or a few weeks after. And that was cool because it meant the whole squad was really invested in tools and ways they could do that monitoring and give them confidence that that deploy was successful. And we also don't have any BAU teams, so if there was an issue in prod that was found however long after, then that team would be responsible for fixing that issue. So at the time that Piers joined, we had kind of just started some of these things. I was also handed the Google SRE book and was like, here, try some of these things. There's a lot of things in there. But we had started writing some synthetic production tests across our core flows, and those were set up to PagerDuty. We had deploy dashboards, so to help our engineers with their deploys, whether that was seeing how many members had the new revisions, so they knew when they could, merge it into default, or other metrics like that. And then we also had some temporary golden signal dashboards that a product team would spin up just to give more observability across what they were changing. And then when that project was finished, they would then hopefully delete it, but not really always. So that's a 1-minute version of what I took Piers through. Yeah.
Cool. And so, as you could hear, there were a lot of things that already existed in the monitoring space that I was really pleased to see. We had capability in terms of people around us who were sophisticated with the tools. They had the core concepts that were really good. And there were some things missing. For example, SLOs that I knew I was going to have to come back to. But by and large, I felt really comfortable with the state of monitoring at TRAME. So the next thing to do is to kind of move up to that kind of incident response tier and spend some time thinking about how that was done at TRAME and what had been done before. So what I discovered was that it was actually a really structured process in place. It was very well documented, it was very linear, and it was very prescriptive. They had a chatbot. These are kind of ubiquitous now, but at the time, Bergerac was cutting edge. It was built before a lot of those commercial offerings. And as a result, it was very tied to the process that they had prescribed. And so there was a start, a middle, and end. And when I sat down and looked at the number of incidents that were ongoing, I was very confused to see that there were in the order of 40 or 50 active incidents for a team of 300 engineers. One of the reasons for that was because the process itself was couldn't actually be closed until the post-mortem had been completed. And I'm sure all of you have been in a situation where that's some duration later. And what I was hearing also was anecdotal reports that there was some avoidance of entering into this process, seeing it was so protracted, that it was seen as bureaucratic. Like most people who ask curious questions, I'm a little bit dubious about the information I'm hearing back in an ad hoc fashion, because you tend to kind of, when you ask those questions, you get the very outspoken replies. So I was a little bit concerned that people who were dissatisfied with that process might be overrepresented in the conversations that I had. And so what I did was I thought, well, how do I get better data about this? I did what any data-driven engineer might do, is a survey to turn that anecdotal information into something a little bit more tangible. So we went out to all 300 of our engineering staff and said, tell me about your experience. What is it like for you? What works and what doesn't work? I know the text on this is kind of small, but the point is really that for this one question around, why do you avoid doing, the incident management process? Why would you avoid it? The common theme here is the POM or post-mortem, which was our JIRA key for where those post-mortems occurred. So pretty much every single answer came back and said, we really don't like this process. We're not seeing the benefits of it. This isn't working. Furthermore, I did some digging around the post-mortem process, and I looked at, across the last 300 days, how many action items have been created in our post-mortems, and how many had been completed. If you're at the back, you probably can't see the small green line at the bottom there that tells us that we had a very small proportion of all of those laundry lists of actions that were actually being completed. And so, I look at those numbers and I go, something isn't right here. This isn't working for people. They've told us it's not working, and clearly we're not seeing the results. So we took this information to our management group and kind of said, well, I think we need to do some things. And here are the things that we did. We had 4 levels of severity that we had been using previously, where Sev 4s were typically important bugs that got rolled into the next release. And I kind of said to myself, if people aren't staying late to fix this problem, I don't think we should be going through this whole big, lengthy post-mortem process in order to manage that. We can do it through our standard deploy to production process. So we reset the expectations that only the Sev 1s and Sev 2s needed to have a post-mortem done. There wasn't anything stopping people doing them for Sev 3s, but it was on a voluntary basis. And some teams embraced that. They really wanted to learn about why things were going south for them, but there was no kind of big brother monitoring. We started a community of debrief facilitators. We disseminated things like the ETE debrief guide, the Howie guide from the Jelly folk, and kind of created a little bit more support for people who wanted to sit down and do their post-mortem processes in a little bit more of a structured and modern way. We moved to SaaS incident management tooling, and that has had big benefits for us by being able to flexibly adapt that process that was very linear originally, and allowed teams to kind of go, well, we want a JIRA out of this, we want to document this as a to-do list or whatever else. But most importantly, we took the kind of learning as the primary objective of our postmortems rather than kind of stressing that you must create a laundry list of action items. Cool, so that's kind of half of that incident response thing. That was the kind of managing the debrief side. We had a similar challenge around the number of people that we have on call. So at this time last year, we were going into the holiday period with just 2 people on our on-call roster for the 300 engineering staff. And so these people were not only being overworked, but they had really unrealistic expectations placed upon them about how much they needed to know about all of the systems. And from an organizational point of view, clearly a lot of risk that we have a bus factor here that we really wanted to do something about. So if you remember one of the earlier slides where we talked about the different kind of business units that we had, the classifieds unit and the marketing unit, really what we wanted to do is diversify the number of people on call, make them responsible for less things, but have more people doing that. So we introduced a middleware. We basically took our alert stream and we worked a way of routing those to those different business units. And again, Catherine was a champion of ours and worked with the marketplace team to kind of verify those results.
Yeah, so probably of the whole thing, this was the easiest part because it was really clear from a company level which business units owned which products, and they'd established that probably a year or 2 before that. So we just had to reroute the alerts to who it belonged to, and that was really it. It was a bit murkier maybe which squad owned which bit, but for our on-call it didn't really matter because it was just one on-call roster per business unit.
Cool. And so obviously that lends itself to kind of expanding on that process as well. So we've got kind of new services that are being deployed into production in the last 6 months or so that go directly onto these rosters. And we've now got a group of around about 20 experienced on-call engineers across those 3 business units. We're in a much healthier state. I think that's everything I wanted to say on that. Cool. So we'd kind of built our on-call team up to around about 20 people. And they were mostly the most experienced engineers that had been with TradeMe for some period of time. And they saw the need for this and they had volunteered for it. What I realized very late in the piece was in order to kind of have that as a sustainable stream of engineers who are kind of developing their skills and kind of moving into their on-call space, we needed to double down on the cultural element that was new to Trade Me. So, for example, and I know this is also true in Australia, there's employment law that says when you become have expectations of working outside of normal hours, there's some sort of financial compensation or recompense for doing so. And that means changing people's contracts. And that means talking to HR, and that means talking to people leaders, and that means bringing everyone along on this journey. And so we really needed to start that conversation so that we didn't get ourselves back into the situation that we had with just a handful of people. We at Trade Me, we have a kind of a really good delivery culture. It's a very well trodden path. We've been doing this stuff for 20 years. We've been delivering new things. But with our cloud migration, what had traditionally been managed by an infrastructure team, which is now a cloud platforms team, some of those services that our squads had typically depended on others for needed to be handled by them themselves. We needed to turn those build teams into build and run teams. And we also wanted to kind of reinforce that idea of kind of creating operational maturity as an intangible asset within the squads. So what does it mean to be on call? What does it mean to have well-monitored systems? And kind of reinforce the ideas that engineers can improve in their career by demonstrating those capabilities. And last but not least on this slide, I have this internal debate with myself around the names that we use for things. And by perhaps thinking carefully about using the term site reliability engineering to describe these activities, and instead talking about growing operational maturity. It simplifies the message for people whose eyes glaze over when you talk about SRE. Like, we're in a room full of SREs here, and there's probably 200 different opinions about what SRE is here, let alone in a place where those SRE concepts are pretty new. Cool. So I said I was going to come back to service level objectives, and here we are. We have an OKR process. I'm sure there are a lot of your organisations are familiar with the objectives and key results concepts for getting team alignment. When we have an OKR around getting our SLOs on our core systems, I really struggled to get interest with those developers to kind of think about how and when to put SLOs in place. Most particularly, it was hard to get prioritization, both in terms of what systems are important to do this with first, and also in terms of getting some of their time to dedicate to this often quite a small task, but a task that wasn't really on their radar. And so one of the things I wanted to pass on was the way I cribbed, at cracking what's the most important thing, which is to look at our disaster recovery plan, which had been well written by our security team, in order, in the event that we had some sort of massive outage, this is the order of events that we would put in place in order to recover our systems. It called out all of the ones that we really needed to treat as core systems into a sequential order that I've adopted in terms of the roadmap for SLOs. The struggle of getting people's time around the work requests, we use the following technique, which Catherine is going to talk to here.
Yeah, so along came the effort pie. So we have two, depending on the team's priorities. Our streamline teams are working on products, so that's their 50% of their time goes to feature development. And then with the platform teams, it's platform strategies. It came about because we recognised that our product teams, especially when now they're owning a lot more of their services, they actually need time to upgrade their platforms and do platform strategic work as well as our platform teams who tend to be the experts in that area need time to enable these teams and support them in whatever way they can. In the second iteration of this, the operations 20% was added, and that's because it was recognised that there's just BAU work, incidents, things just to keep the lights running that you need time to do, like if you don't plan for that time, it doesn't just go away. People just do it under the radar, or it doesn't get done. But my favourite part of the effort pie is the 10% for personal development, and so our engineers are all enabled to actually push back on delivery work to make sure they take that 10% of time, and that's how we make sure we keep up with ever-changing technology as it does. Yeah.
Cool. And this is the kind of the most recent initiative that we've put in place, which is operational review meetings. Now, I said that we have a strong culture of delivery, and our first step to getting better in the operations side is to really kind of structure a regular ritual around reflecting on how things have been in our kind of operational world for each team. We do these monthly inside of the CAT team, that kind of central technology team, where we talk about SLOs, any incidents, and emergent risks. Particularly the emergent risks one's interesting to me because a lot of that information had never been captured before. Teams who are working on technology know what they're worried about, and being able to provide them an opportunity to say, hey, I think this is important, hey, I know this upgrade is coming, allows us to think carefully about what we're going to spend that 20% of the effort pie on for the next quarter, and gives them real influence over the work that they do ongoing. I'm not going to talk anymore around operational review meetings. I know that Karthik is going to be talking about this on Friday morning, so I would recommend you come and listen to his talk. Cool. And so, in summary, if I was a time traveler and I could go back 12 months and reassure myself that it was going to be, it's going to be all okay, these are the things I would tell myself. Choose a project early to prove your credibility. So for us, it was taking our old incident management process, reworking it, evangelizing on behalf of the developers to management that we needed to invest in that space and we needed to improve that process. Secondly, simplify the messages. So, the SRE book is big, but when you're working on a particular aspect at a time, just simplify those messages. And it's really true that whole communicate 7 times, 7 different ways. I get really bored of myself speaking about these things, but I tolerate it because I know it's the right thing to do. And then thirdly, investing in that cultural change is a really long-term game. It's taken me 6 months to even realize that that's the core of the problem. So it's going to take a far longer period of time to complete this journey.
Yeah, and for me, SRE is not just for site reliability engineers. Piers could not have done it all by himself. And get reliability work onto committed roadmaps. So we did that through an effort pie, but there's many other tools out there, but you just got to make sure that it's on a roadmap so it actually gets done. Yeah. So that is us.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Ready for Q&A if there's time.